Today, I have a privilege to talk to Richard Sachs. Richard, will you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi Sam. It's a real pleasure to see you again after being away for a little while. I'm an independent health scientist in America. I have been involved in that since 1965, and I started out motivated by my own really bad health condition at the time, and it made me do a lot of investigation. I realized that the conventional health system was killing me, killing my physical body at that time, and I decided to dump it. I have not been back for 55 years, and I decided I wanted to find out, how health and disease happen, what are the laws of nature that are at work there, what's the real perspective that the drug industry and so-called health industry are not talking about, that we need to know, that's practical for people. And as I got into that, it took me deeper into levels of consciousness, which is a term that has so many different opposing definitions now that it's not generally understood, but I knew that it was behind everything. And that's one thing I enjoyed by meeting you and learning about your work, is because I think you would probably feel the same way. And after that, at some point, I decided I had to know what's going on in the outside world, because I was involved starting in the 70s with organic agriculture and the connection of cycles in nature and climate. And we were looking at atmospheric gas ratios in the late 60s, what later became misused as the basis of the climate change hoax and all that. But there's reality behind it that needs to be understood. And it became clear over time that nature is put together in an intricate series of cycles, and everything is connected to everything else. Nothing ever happens by chance. And to get in touch with the depth of how this whole place works and the unseen aspects beyond it that we're not aware of requires a change in our own perception, and ended up with consciousness. And starting it, I'm sorry to go on so long, just one more point is that starting in the year 2000, I did a really deep investigation of the global power structure and the rulers above the level that the public sees, and where they're going, why all this stuff is happening, what their objectives are, what they intend for us in the years immediately ahead. And when I saw what that was, how to avert that future and make the opposite outcome happen instead. So that's what I'm involved in now.
We'll come back to that. But first, tell me, where do you live?
Sedona, Arizona, in the U.S.
Okay, the year 2020, from your perspective from Sedona and the US, how would you describe it?
The uncloaking of the real power structure that has been running the world, and the opportunity for us to respond.
So what's been happening this year?
The powers that have been in charge working on a negative, destructive agenda for millennia have become more visible. And they now figure, their calculations say that we have become automated and unconscious enough, more like zombies, to the point where they can openly start declaring what they're doing and accelerating it. And so far, there are small signs of awakening, but not nearly enough to avert the future that they have planned. And the technology and coordination and communications that they have available now allow them to coordinate a worldwide attack against humanity for the first time in our known world history.
Small size of awakening, percentage-wise?
Well, if you're talking about numbers of people, it's a spectrum of degree, because it's not awake or not awake. It's everybody is involved in their own personal journey and lessons, and they've gotten to different points along the way. So I think that it's affecting huge numbers of people, but to different degrees. And there's a lot of steps in the awakening process. And even to know what awakening means is not widely understood. There are a lot of people that think being able to list all the terrible things that are happening means you're awake, but not in the sense that I'm meaning it. Awakening means self-awareness, because everyone is the actual center of their perceptual universe, and that if they want to have a positive effect on it, they need to first do the work internally in their own self. And that awakening is different.
Now, why would the architects of this project happening to us in 2020 pick up this particular year?
Well, they're very much into the significance of numerology and astrological signs and all kinds of symbology in general. But mainly they've calculated that at this point, see, they had objectives for 2020, 2030, 2050, 1900. I mean, all these different milestones. They're involved ultimately in what they consider a spiritual process from the negative point of view. And what it really boils down to is the ceremonial sacrifice of the whole biosphere, including their own bodies. They don't plan to physically survive it. And I don't think that's widely understood. So to make that sacrifice have the result that they want, they must hit certain milestones at certain times, and they must give certain notices to the public through different channels of what they're actually doing. And they're carefully doing it. They have the technology to kill the biosphere overnight, and they're not doing that. It has to fit the parameters of the ceremony, or they don't get the spiritual reward that they expect from it.
Which would be?
Merging with the dark power above the physical level permanently in what they visualize as a kind of cyberspace that they can become part of and not need their physical world anymore at all. I think that's where they're going.
You see, majority of the people, when they think about the world, they think in a sense of different countries, US, China,
Sure.
European Union. But what you are saying is probably something different. Who's behind the scene?
Yeah, the rulers don't have any allegiance to any particular country. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's, yeah.
It's interestingly that, you know a lot about pyramids, and if you diagram the business power structure, it's pyramid shaped. So there are levels of servants of the agenda that know different degrees of what's happening, and only the few at the very top, at the human level, understand where they're going with this. If they told the servants at the high corporate level, the elite bankers and the rulers on that level, what the plan is, it would really be damaging to morale, because they'd have to tell them that they're all scheduled to be killed. They're only being used temporarily while they're useful. And they're being told that they're going to be in the elite remnant that still survive after a reduction of the population. That's not true. That's a step. Where they're going is total destruction. And you can even see this logically, because if you're planning to just reduce the population and leave a remnant ruling class to have the world as their playground, you don't destroy the support systems of life on the planet. And that's clearly what they're doing. Nobody does that if they need to survive.
There are 7.8 billion people on the planet.
Yeah.
And on the other side, what, 10,000 billionaires?
I think there's more billionaires than that now, but the billionaires are not the rulers. Billionaires are along that, layers of the power structure. At the top, they have unlimited money, and they're not in it for money at all. It's totally satanic. And they're in it, they believe in, even fairly high up in the structure, not at the top, they're satanically oriented. They do ceremonies to torture and kill children and do all kinds of really bad things. At the top, they're trying to carry out the sacrifice and obey the directions of the non-human entities that are above them giving orders. That's coming from a level that I would call the astral level, but the terminology is not important because the definitions vary.
Where do you see the way out for humanity?
I think you can take a clue. I mean, you don't need the clue, but you can verify this with a clue from what our rulers are doing. And they have various things that they're trying to hide from us through the censorship and suppression of information and things like that. And that of all of the taboo areas of knowledge that we're not supposed to find out is who we really are. Not just in theory or belief or religion, but I mean who we really are, aside from anything that it says in any book. The reality is above that. And who we really are leads to what we could really do. And we're made out of the same essence as where we came from. So are the bad guys. They just don't know it. But we don't know it either. And if they succeed in making sure we don't find out until their agenda gets completed, then we are going to have to continue that learning somewhere else. But there'd be a lot of pain involved in that, the end of this place, and I really prefer not to see that happen.
So, who we really are?
We're indescribable, unlimited spirit made of the same essence of what we came from. And hints of this are in various scriptures of different religions around the world. And people have heard of things like being made in the image of God. It's not because your nose is exactly the right number of inches, although that's true in a way. It's that this is a very low density frequency that we're experiencing as the real world, and our bodies that we identify with, the minds that we identify with. We're the person that is living in those conscious costumes, but we are still there when the costume is over. And the same with the mind. And mind is more long-lived. It outlives the physical body, but it is not permanent. And we're the one that came into those vehicles for certain experiences, but we're made of pure spirit, and so is everybody, and so is everything. This is just spirit looking through the clouded prism of mind programs. And the programs stop, who we are becomes apparent. We start acting as we really are.
So, we can identify the forces of darkness.
Yeah.
On the other side, where are the forces of light?
They're everywhere. They're all around us. And people get feeling like they're isolated and nobody around who understands them and all this kind of thing. That's never been true. We're just unaware of it. Our vision has become very restricted, and we look through our senses, and they're tuned into this narrow portion of the band of what we call physical light energy. And we're surrounded by the most incredible friends and allies that we could ever imagine, but they follow certain protocols just like the bad guys do, and they're not to intrude on our free will, except in certain rare instances. And they let us learn our lessons, and they do more if they get invited. But you have to change consciousness to invite them. There's no magic words that take the place of that. Neither the dark side or the light side really has any magic words. They just use them as vehicles for certain energy, and the energy gives them power.
You mentioned the protocols. You've been developing some. You want to share them with us?
You're talking about positive protocols, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, they grow through stages, like learning about your physical body and your mind and what those really are. And which is not just reading a paragraph in a book. It's a series of experiences that open up communication between you in your physical body and between you and your mind. And it turns out that those two entities are both alive, self-aware, capable of two-way communication, which they've been trying to have with us since before we were born. We get that back and they become allies, and then we realize that who is it that's communicating with them? If I'm talking to mind, I'm not mind. I'm something else. It's not something that has the perfect description because it's beyond language. It has to be experienced. And as that becomes the new normal identity, the abilities that we have normally that we've forgotten for a long time, those come back. And we find at that point that we don't have to destroy the bad guys. We see who the bad guys are. They're confused spirit, just like we have been. They're just playing a different role. But what threatens them the most is that at the top, they're aware that if we wake up, we can wake them up. No need to destroy anybody. And even though that's their way out, it's the thing they're most afraid of. So it's the thing that we need to do. Starting with ourselves, of course. So we can only do to the degree that we become something different, which is who we actually always were.
Richard, tell us about other.
You froze for quite a while there, or I did. I don't know which.
No. So, tell us about other entities. Are they around us to assist us? How do we communicate with them?
There are positive ones and negative ones. And the way to protect yourself against the negative ones is to change your own frequency, because they have no interest in being around high frequency individuals at all. Things draw the negative ones that are us being out of harmony with ourselves. So getting into drugs, getting into certain kinds of misuse of sexual communication, and there are other ways that we weaken our own field of defense that's natural, and then we start getting attacked and even potentially taken over by some of these negative entities. So possession is real, but it's not really what we've heard about. It's got its own characteristics. But on the positive side, we're surrounded by the most amazing beings. You know, everybody's heard of guardian angels in different languages, and those are real, no matter whether you believe in them or whether you have the right or the wrong religion in your opinion, or it has nothing to do with any of that stuff at all. These are real, just like people are real. In fact, they really are just people on a higher level. They've been on different places as well. And some of them get assigned to each one of us. So all they do for our whole life is be available to help us. But they can't trespass. So they might save us from a deadly situation sometime and then disappear again. But for the most part, they cannot intrude unless we get to the point where we can consciously invite them. At that point, they become allies. So we have all kinds of potential allies, including our own physical body, which is a conscious entity, and our own mind, which is likewise aware. And these other beings that you could call angels, but they don't care what you call them. You know, they're still what they are. And there are all different levels of those. And the ultimate conscious spirit itself that people call God, which in my experience is not like the fearful being that you're supposed to be terrified of, that throws the bad people into permanent torture with no possibility of parole and stuff like that. Even a normal, mature human would never do something like that. But there's a real ultimate spirit that is like, you could describe it as unconditional, unlimited love, but it's actually what that comes from. So it's really beyond description. That being that people call God is right with everybody all the time and capable of hearing our communication, is aware of our communication all the time. And people make all these, synthetic gestures and symbologies and uh, prescribed prayers and all these things. And it's like, spirit isn't artificial like that. It's the most unartificial thing you can imagine. So if you want to be in touch with it, be sincere, talk, or do it in your thoughts. And it turns out that we can communicate not just with what people call God, but with anybody else at any distance, at any time, subliminally, even the so-called bad people. And if we develop our own consciousness and then share that with them, even against their will, they're going to wake up to who they really are. And this place could become really different, very beautiful. As a good stopover before we get to the places on the way back to where we came from.
Those entities, both positive and negative, how long they've been present, affecting humanity?
Since the beginning of humanity. Maybe different ones, because they're individuals too, and they have different assignments at different times. But we're never left by ourselves, and we never have been. Nobody's ever been alone.
Tell us about the origin of humanity.
The origin of everything is the same. It's from formless spirit. And then people think about, I say spirit because people picture God as a man, and I'm not talking about a form or a gender. I'm talking about the essence of life. Before there was any form, before there was light, before there was thought or mind or bodies or universes or anything like that, the essence was still the same as it is now. And for some, this gets out of the realm of human language, because people think, well, why did God want to create creation? Or why did God want to experience itself as all these different forms? But that question is predicated on everything coming from mind. And mind wasn't even created until it got down to the lower levels of experience where it was needed. Direct perception was before that. And so, for no reason, just because that was the decision, well, it wasn't a decision, sorry, again, I'm falling into human language. The event occurred that the only essence that there was, which was spirit in the beginning, became all of the different individualized forms, unaware of itself as the original, and came through lower and denser levels of frequency, like a waterfall, going down through different levels, one to the next, and finally got all the way down to the very slow, dense frequency of what we call the physical reality, multiple vast universes, all just on this lower level. And who is really experiencing itself in all these different life forms and apparently different people, positive non-physical entities and negative non-physical entities. None of that could have been made out of anybody but the original spirit, because there wasn't anything else to make it out of. There wasn't a Home Depot that God could go design a certain kind of being or something. There was nothing. There was no thought. There was that essence. So that's what gives everything its hope and certainty of getting back to where it came from, is that there's nowhere else to go back to. And I know a lot of people consider this blasphemy, but I would say there's no way anybody could ever be lost forever, no matter how bad, in quotes, they appear to be. They're following a script, and it's their own mind programs that are putting them in that misunderstanding to act as the ultimate bad guy or the confused human or anything, you know, of any kind. There's no form that's not a life form that's not conscious. The idea of inanimate objects is inaccurate. So.
Richard, who am I talking to right now? Which Richard? Which particular frequency? The one in physical body, your mind, your consciousness, your soul, your spirit?
Really important question. And, you know, I thought for a long time I shouldn't say anything because compared to what we need to do, I'm like a below preschool level beginner. And I know basically nothing compared to what there is to know. But I've made some changes. And those don't come just from this lifetime. I have memory of doing some of the earlier stages in several other times. And I have one memory of a time between when it wasn't physical at all, just before coming in this time. So I've done some beginner work, and I'm aware of myself as spirit as opposed to body and mind. But it's just the early stages of that. So I don't know what label you would put on that. Coming from some kind of a unusual place, I think, but, you know, like practically nothing compared to where we're going. And I got the feeling that even though I wanted to become invisible and never say anything and don't see people and just be in nature and continue my own work in seclusion, I got the feeling that that's not what you're supposed to do. You know, you need to make contact. There's people that need to interact, and there's work that we need to do on this level. So that's why I'm here.
How happy you are with this life experience?
It's kind of a paradoxical answer to that because I look around, you know, first of all, I don't just look at my own personal life experience. I feel connected to everybody. And so I feel, you could call it empathy, but people going through their difficulties and suffering in their experience in different parts of the world, I feel all that all the time. That's part of experience. So I don't like that, you know, personally. It's not my preference. I see people paint pictures of hell with these people being tortured and these flames coming up and everything is, you know, as bad as they can imagine, and different images of the Christians and Jews and Muslims. The Muslims picture people having their skin torn off over and over again, and this is happening forever to the bad people. And these are the visions of hell from conventional religions. But what I look at, what's happening in this world on the physical level and all the emotional and mental stuff that goes with it, I think this is really hellish in my opinion because of the beauty. I don't like to see beauty continually torn apart and people not being aware of who they really are and going through what's called the normal aging process. That's like a version of hell to me. And one of the things that motivated me to try to find out what is going on here, you know, who are we and what is this place? Because, you know, there's what's called a normalcy bias, that what is common becomes designated as normal, but they're not the same. In an insane hospital, everybody's insane and that's considered normal. And we're in a big one of those right now. It's called the physical world. And so no, I spent a lot of time really looking into what's going on with the negatively oriented people involved, the satanic levels of the power structure and all that. And I see that what they're doing to themselves in the process, and all their official victims and all of us, and the total extermination that is their plan systematically to impose. And I don't feel very happy with that because I just don't really like everybody to have to be suffering like this, whether they're so-called good or bad. We need to have the same compassion for the bad actors, because just imagine what it would be like to be in their place. It's not something that you would like. They're prisoners like we are. But I'm happy with the idea of the reality is something great. And every single one of us is infinitely important and has access to all of it. So I'm pretty happy with that. It's just we need to become bridges now between our original essence and not wait till we die or put it in some spiritual category, so-called, or something. It's got to come right down into the physical level, and it's time to demonstrate it and not just have it as a philosophy anymore. So now I think that's what I would like to see happen next.
Richard, I have two more questions for you.
Sure.
The first one, the next decade, 2021 to 2030, give us two possible scenarios for humanity.
The easiest ones to look at are the two extremes, you know, if we do wake up and if we don't. And when I say we, I don't mean 7.8 billion people or whatever the exact number is. I mean a critical mass, which is relatively small and in my mind not defined in exact numbers, because it's the quality that you put into it. And the more quality, the less people could do it. So one of the scenarios where that actually happens, this place becomes its own version of a Garden of Eden or a heaven on earth. Its real potential for beauty comes out. Everything changes. That could happen. It's not the ultimate goal, and neither is the astral heavens. Those are real too, and they're reflected in many scriptures and religions. Those are not the ultimate goal either. We're going far beyond that. This could reflect that here if we wake up and help other people too. Not by evangelizing and explaining, but when you become that, you automatically affect everyone else without saying a word. And that's how you know what you're getting to, by what happens to the people around you without any overt signs if you're trying to change them. And the other scenario, if the current rulers get their wish, then life on this planet ends in the near future. I don't think it would last 10 years. So those are two possibilities.
And the last question, your message to humanity.
You have incredible significance and power and potential as an individual, no matter who you are. And just like the message of our current rulers is, give up your own importance and your own rights and your own freedom and your own self-worth for the so-called good of the whole. That's a complete fraud. And it's part of this larger plan to hide who and what you are and what you could do. So the negative power structure is giving you guidance, which is reliable. And that says, just reverse what they're saying and follow it. Learn who you are. Learn the reality, not the fake education that's being given now on so many levels, from preschool to medical and Ph.D. school. It's all based on fraud. And you have access to all of it internal. It's more than carrying a vast library. You have direct connection to where you came from. You don't have to wait till you leave this lifetime to access that. Be motivated, decide what you want, and everything that could be accomplished is done by accessing your actual self and waking that up. Not in a belief, not in a philosophy, not in a bunch of stuff that you could give a talk on. It's not anything like that. It's experience. So you get in touch with that, and you have the ability, if you have the motivation, the means will show up for you to do it.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Richard.
My pleasure, Sam. It's great to see you. We'll talk again soon.